in the heart of New York City, where towering skyscrapers and shimmering lights make dreams feel within arm's reach. He stood out. Lucas Gray, handsome, well-dressed, and every bit the image of a man who could make anyone feel out of place just by being near him. A Harvard graduate, the son of a billionaire investor, and the current rising star in the tech world, he had a reputation for being as elusive as he was sought after. Love? That was a game he left for others to play. He had no time for romance, especially with the constant swirl of glamorous women eager for his attention. So, when that modest girl from the countryside pulled up in her old, rattling car, a relic, really, from a generation or two ago, Lucas barely even noticed. Emily Chen was a small-town girl with wide eyes and a bright smile. Dressed simply in a sundress that hinted at her effortless charm, she was the kind of woman who would turn heads anywhere else. But here, amidst the sheen of high fashion and sleek luxury, she blended into the background, and that was perfectly fine with her. Little did Lucas know, beneath Emily's humble appearance was a woman who had built her empire from the ground up. As the discreet yet formidable head of one of the nation's largest culinary conglomerates, she had the power to influence tastes and dining trends across America. And as fate would have it, their paths were about to cross in a way that would shake his entire world. The first encounter. The evening shimmered with a kind of opulence Lucas Gray had long grown accustomed to. In the ballroom of New York's grandest hotel, men in tailored suits and women in glittering gowns brushed shoulders, filling the air with the hum of refined conversation and the clinking of crystal glasses. But Lucas, tall and lean with a quiet confidence, stood out even in this glamorous crowd. As he navigated through clusters of guests, he barely noticed the young woman in a simple blue dress, her hair swept back in an understated way, her gaze taking in the scene with wide-eyed curiosity. She looked like she didn't belong. Her dress was not designer. Her shoes were modest, and she carried none of the polish that others here wore like armor. "Lucas, meet Emily Chen," a mutual acquaintance said, casually waving a hand in her direction. Lucas's eyes flicked to her, and he gave her a polite nod, offering a quick, practiced smile. He was used to people being fascinated by him, and frankly, this girl didn't catch his interest beyond a courteous glance. "Hello," he said, his tone warm but distant. Emily, for her part, smiled brightly, her eyes dancing with something close to amusement. "Pleasure to meet you," she said, her voice gentle yet firm. Her confidence surprised him, and he noticed, almost begrudgingly, that she didn't seem fazed by his coolness. Still, with a quick excuse about needing to greet other guests, he moved on, unaware that this would not be the last he'd see of her. The Dinner of Secrets. 2 days after the gala, Lucas found an elegantly designed invitation on his desk, a private dining experience with a personalized note in perfect cursive handwriting. "For a taste beyond the ordinary, I invite you to dine as my guest. I assure you, it will be a meal you won't forget." He chuckled to himself. So, Emily Chen had tracked him down. After all, amused and curious, he accepted the invitation, expecting a casual, maybe even humble meal in some charming corner restaurant. When he arrived, however, he was taken aback. The restaurant was no modest, rustic setting but an exclusive, dimly lit room draped in sophistication, with candle-lit tables and polished silverware. The dining room overlooked the city's sparkling skyline, making the atmosphere feel intimate and almost romantic. Emily herself greeted him, dressed in a sleek black dress that hugged her form tastefully. And her smile was the same, bright, welcoming, and confident. Lucas felt a flicker of something he couldn't quite place, admiration. Maybe, but mixed with a growing curiosity. "Welcome," she said smoothly, motioning him to a private table. "I thought I'd personally guide you through each course tonight." As the first course arrived, Lucas was stunned by the depth of flavors, a delicate fusion of local and international ingredients, each bite telling a story of craftsmanship and passion. Emily explained each dish, her eyes lighting up as she described flavors, spices, and the inspiration behind each element. "How did you learn so much about food?" he found himself asking. Genuinely intrigued, she shrugged, smiling. "Cooking has always been part of my life. I grew up learning the basics in my family's kitchen, then refined it over the years. It's a mix of tradition and innovation." Lucas listened, entranced. He couldn't believe he'd brushed this woman off so casually before. As they spoke, he realized that beneath her humility lay a fiercely intelligent, driven woman who had clearly fought her way to success. She was a world apart from the polished socialites he often found himself surrounded by. Their conversation flowed through each course, and with every dish, he felt his preconceptions about her unraveling. She was no simple small-town girl, no admirer seeking his attention. Emily Chen was an enigma, and Lucas found himself wanting to uncover more. The revelation of their worlds. Days after their remarkable dinner, Lucas couldn't shake Emily Chen from his mind. She was different, grounded, unassuming, yet layered with a confidence he couldn't quite decipher. He found himself researching her, expecting perhaps a family-owned restaurant or a small chain. But what he uncovered left him stunned. Emily Chen wasn't merely involved in the culinary world, she was a force within it. The CEO and founder of Harvest Gate Foods, a conglomerate that owned several nationally acclaimed food brands and gourmet restaurants. She had built an empire, pioneering a movement of accessible, farm-to-table dining experiences that resonated with people across America. The more he learned, the more he realized just how vast her influence was in shaping the dining industry. And yet, she'd shown up to a gala in a modest dress, arriving in that old car, blending into the crowd like she was just another guest. Lucas knew he had to see her again. He called her office, arranging a second dinner under the pretense of discussing a potential partnership between his tech firm and her company. Perhaps integrating tech into their distribution systems or supply chain. Emily agreed with a smile in her voice, and they scheduled a dinner at one of her signature restaurants, a place specializing in innovative, seasonal dishes. That evening, as they sat across from each other in the softly lit restaurant, Lucas found himself unusually nervous. This wasn't a date, and yet, he couldn't help but feel he was about to confess something important. Something he hadn't been fully honest about, his ignorance and underestimation of her. Emily, he began after their appetizers arrived. I have to admit, I underestimated you. I've been reading about your work. About Harvest Gate Foods. You've accomplished so much, and in such a short time. Emily smiled modestly, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. I've been fortunate, she said, her voice humble, but luck only takes you so far. It's been a lot of hard work, late nights, and overcoming people's doubts. She glanced at him, and he caught the subtle challenge in her gaze. She knew he'd been one of those doubters. I was one of them, wasn't I? He admitted, his tone light but sincere. At the gala, I assumed you were. Well, I'm not sure what I assumed, but I didn't realize who you really were. Emily's smile softened, and for a moment, the guarded walls she usually kept around herself seemed to lower. I grew up in a small town, and I never had the means or connections some people are born into. She explained, I had to work twice as hard to make people take me seriously. Especially in a male-dominated industry. But I found a way in by staying true to what I love. Lucas was quiet, his respect for her deepening. He felt humbled, seeing how hard she had fought for her place, compared to his life of privilege and opportunities laid at his feet. As the courses arrived one by one, their conversation became more personal. Emily shared stories of her family, her memories of learning to cook with her grandmother, and how she dreamt of creating a brand that combined quality and accessibility, giving everyone the experience of exceptional food. And Lucas, in turn, spoke of his own path, one that had felt aimless despite his accomplishments. A series of successes that had left him feeling hollow. They were worlds apart, yet their connection felt undeniable. By the end of the evening, Lucas knew he wanted more than just a business partnership with Emily. He wanted to know her, understand her, and maybe, if he were lucky, become part of her world. An unexpected challenge. Just as things seemed to blossom between them, a crisis struck Emily's company. A rival corporation, threatened by Harvest Gate's rapid rise, had launched a hostile takeover bid. News broke in business papers and spread like wildfire, stirring anxiety among Emily's employees and investors. When Lucas saw the headlines, he called Emily immediately. Emily, I saw the news. Let me help. I know people in the industry. There are ways to prevent this. But Emily's voice was calm, though he could hear the tension beneath it. Thank you, Lucas, but I've handled difficult situations before. I'm not ready to call in favors just yet. Lucas felt a pang of frustration. Why wouldn't she let him help? He knew she was capable, but he couldn't stand by and watch her struggle alone. Over the following days, he offered his assistance repeatedly, but each time, she gently refused, determined to fight the battle her own way. It wasn't until Lucas began to investigate the source of the takeover that he realized the attempt wasn't just a random business move. The attack had roots tied to one of his own business associates, a man named Philip Cartwright, a longtime rival and occasional partner who was known for his underhanded tactics. Philip had somehow discovered Lucas's interest in Emily and saw her company as a threat to their shared market space. Feeling torn between his loyalty to Emily and his connections in his own world, Lucas faced a dilemma. Standing up to Philip would mean risking his own business ties and perhaps inviting future retribution. But he couldn't watch Emily's company fall to a man as unscrupulous as Philip. After a few days of sleepless nights and long conversations with Emily, who insisted she could handle it on her own, Lucas finally made his choice. He confronted Philip, warning him that if he continued the takeover, Lucas would use every resource he had to expose Philip's tactics, ruining his reputation in the industry. The gamble worked, and Philip, not willing to risk his status, backed down. But Lucas knew the victory came at a cost. His relationship with Emily had become strained, as she resented that he had interfered despite her wishes. Love in the limelight. Their friendship, once filled with laughter and shared dreams, had become tense. But Lucas, unable to keep his feelings hidden any longer, finally confessed to her one evening after they met for coffee. "Emily, I know I pushed too hard, but I couldn't stand the thought of losing you, not just as a business partner but as someone I care about." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Lucas, I never needed you to save me," she said quietly. "I wanted you by my side as an equal. That's all." In that moment, Lucas realized that he'd still been seeing her as someone he needed to protect rather than as his equal. "I'm sorry," he said, reaching for her hand. "I do see you as my equal. Emily, I think I'm just not used to feeling this way about anyone." Slowly, a smile broke across her face. "Then let's try again, but as equals this time." And with that, they moved forward, facing the world together as partners in both life and business, no longer defined by their wealth or titles, but by the respect and understanding they'd found in each other's worlds. The longing of Lucas Gray. For Lucas, life had always been predictable. He was surrounded by people whose smiles were polished but hollow, who wore their wealth like armor. Business, success, and influence were his daily currency. Yet none of it seemed to touch him deeply anymore. He had climbed high, but in the coldness of his achievements, Lucas often felt like an observer in his own life, watching from afar, untouched by the warmth of real human connection. But Emily Chen had changed everything. After their second dinner, Lucas found himself thinking about her constantly. He remembered the glow in her eyes as she'd spoken of her company, the way her voice softened when she spoke of her family. She was more than just beautiful, she was fierce, resilient, and refreshingly real in a world full of pretenders. And, perhaps most remarkably, she didn't care about his wealth or status. She saw him as just Lucas, and he found himself craving that simplicity. Yet, every time he tried to reach out, she remained distant. The more he pursued her, the more he felt as though she was slipping through his fingers, like sand he couldn't quite hold on to. Emily's battle. Emily, on the other hand, was conflicted. Her feelings for Lucas were undeniable, and she found herself drawn to him in a way she hadn't expected. There was a softness in him that only revealed itself in quiet moments, a vulnerability beneath the stoic exterior. She saw glimpses of a man who wanted something deeper, someone who was just as lost in his own world as she had once been. But her past had taught her to be careful. She had clawed her way to the top, fending off doubters, dismissive mentors, and the stereotypes that haunted every woman who dared to lead in a male-dominated industry. She had learned to trust no one but herself, to never rely on others. Lucas was different, yes, but that didn't mean he could fully understand the weight she carried or the cost of her independence. So when the hostile takeover threatened her company, Emily instinctively turned inward. She shut Lucas out, not out of pride, but because she was afraid of losing the control she had fought so hard to gain. An unspoken distance. In the days that followed, Lucas tried to reach out, but Emily's replies grew colder, more formal. He sent flowers, thinking she might find the gesture endearing. but they were politely returned with a brief note of thanks. Frustration gnawed at him. He wanted to be by her side, to fight her battles together. But she refused to let him in. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Lucas found himself standing outside her office building, hoping for even a few moments of her time. She appeared in the lobby, looking exhausted but as poised as ever, her expression softening in surprise when she saw him. "Lucas," she said quietly, glancing around as though worried about what others might think. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to see you," he replied, his voice laced with a raw honesty he hadn't felt in years. "I don't understand why you keep pushing me away." Emily looked down, the faintest trace of sadness in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Lucas," she murmured, "but there are things I need to handle alone. This is my fight." He reached for her hand, and to his relief, she didn't pull away. "I don't just want to be a spectator, Emily. I want to be part of your life. All of it. Please, let me in." Her eyes met his, and for a brief, fragile moment, her guard lowered. "I know you do," she said softly, a bittersweet smile tugging at her lips. "But I need to know that you see me as more than someone who needs saving. I need to know that you respect my strength, even when I push you away." Lucas's chest tightened, understanding the depth of her words. He realized he had been viewing her as someone to protect, rather than as an equal who had forged her own path long before he came into her life. "I do respect you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "And I'll wait as long as you need." Emily's hand slipped from his, and she gave him a nod of quiet gratitude before turning to leave. Lucas watched her go, feeling a blend of longing and determination. He was willing to wait, but he was also willing to change, for her. A turn of events. Weeks passed, and the hostile takeover continued to loom over Emily's company, creating a tense atmosphere that weighed heavily on everyone involved. Emily fought tirelessly, pouring herself into her work, determined to keep her company in her own hands. But the strain was taking its toll, and even her closest colleagues began to notice the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she no longer smiled as easily. One evening, as she worked late, she received a call from Lucas. She considered ignoring it, but something in her heart urged her to answer. "Emily." His voice was warm, steady. "I know you're still in the middle of everything, but I need to tell you something. I found out who's behind the takeover." Her heart skipped a beat. She'd tried to shield him from the details, thinking it would spare him any pain, but he had found a way in regardless. "It's Philip Cartwright," he continued. "He's been a rival of mine for years. I don't know why he's targeting you specifically, but I suspect it has something to do with his resentment toward me." Emily was silent for a long moment. "Lucas, I didn't want you involved in this," she said, her voice strained. "I know," he replied gently, "but I can't stand by and watch someone tear down everything you've built. Let me help, Emily, not because you need me to, but because I want to support you." For the first time, Emily felt a flicker of relief. Maybe she didn't have to shoulder this alone. Maybe Lucas's presence wasn't a threat to her independence, but a source of strength she could lean on without losing herself. "Thank you, Lucas," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The confrontation. With Lucas's help, Emily confronted Philip at a tense board meeting. Lucas stood by her side, his gaze steady and unyielding as he watched Philip squirm under the weight of their combined forces. Philip tried to brush them off, but Emily's calm, poised demeanor unnerved him. She laid out her terms, exposing his underhanded tactics and making it clear that any further interference would not be tolerated. Lucas, ever the strategist, quietly added that any further action against HarvestGate would result in a public scandal that would cripple Philip's reputation. Backed into a corner, Philip finally relented, withdrawing his bid and leaving the room with a scowl. As soon as he was gone, Emily felt a rush of relief mixed with a strange exhilaration. She turned to Lucas, her eyes shining with gratitude and something more. "You didn't have to do that," she said, her voice trembling, "but thank you." Lucas took her hand, his grip warm and steady. "I did it because I believe in you, Emily. You are one of the strongest people I've ever met." For the first time, she allowed herself to truly believe it. She was strong, but she didn't have to be alone. She could share her life, her battles, and still be herself. A new beginning. In the weeks that followed, their relationship blossomed into something deeper, built on trust, mutual respect, and an unspoken understanding of each other's strengths and vulnerabilities. They spent late nights together, laughing, sharing stories, and dreaming about a future that seemed both improbable and inevitable. On one such evening, as they sat in a quiet cafe, Lucas looked at her with a smile that held a world of unspoken promises. "I never thought I'd meet someone like you," he said softly. "You've changed the way I see everything. And I want to build something with you, not just a partnership in business, but a life." Emily's heart raced as she took in his words, the sincerity in his eyes. She had fought so long and hard to build a life of her own. But for the first time, she realized that sharing it didn't make it any less hers. She could be strong, independent, and still find happiness with someone who saw her for who she truly was. "Then let's build it together," she replied, her voice filled with a quiet joy. They clasped hands across the table, knowing that the journey ahead would be challenging, but also knowing that they were no longer alone. Together, they would face whatever came their way, not as savior and saved, but as equals, partners, and perhaps someday, as lovers. And so, Lucas and Emily embarked on their next chapter, bound not by wealth or titles, but by the strength they'd found in each other. Their love was a slow burn, built on respect and resilience, a love forged in battles fought and dreams shared. And it was a love that would shape them both, just as surely as they had shaped each other. Their story had only just begun, and for the first time, they both felt truly alive, a test of trust. As Lucas and Emily's relationship grew, they faced a new challenge, finding balance. Emily, fiercely independent, had built a life on her terms. She was used to making decisions alone, trusting her instincts without interference. Lucas, on the other hand, was accustomed to taking the lead, especially in matters of business. Their differences became more apparent as they began collaborating closely. And the differences, while once alluring, now tested the foundation of their bond. One evening, they sat in Emily's spacious yet modestly furnished apartment, surrounded by stacks of documents and proposals for a new restaurant concept she was launching under Harvest Gate Foods. She had envisioned a vibrant, open-space kitchen where chefs would prepare meals in front of the guests, creating an immersive experience rooted in transparency and freshness. Her eyes sparkled as she described it, and Lucas could see how much it meant to her. "I love it," he said genuinely, "but why limit yourself to just one location? You have the resources and the reputation to expand it across major cities. We could even invest in some cutting-edge technology to streamline the experience." Emily's smile faded slightly. She was quiet for a moment, then looked up. "I appreciate the ambition, Lucas, but this project is personal to me. I want it to feel intimate, like it's a piece of my hometown brought to the city. Scaling it would change the entire concept." Lucas opened his mouth to respond but stopped. Sensing her frustration, he understood her vision but couldn't shake the instinct to optimize, to build bigger. They fell into a brief silence, the air thick with an unspoken tension. Seeing the change in her expression, he reached across the table, taking her hand gently. "Emily, I respect your vision. I just want to help you achieve everything you're capable of. But if you want to keep it small, then I'll support you, no questions asked." Emily's face softened, and she squeezed his hand. "Thank you. It means a lot to me that you're willing to see it my way. I know it's hard for you not to expand every project you touch." Their eyes met, and in that moment, they both understood that love wasn't about changing each other. It was about meeting in the middle, building a path that allowed them both to thrive. A shift in the shadows. Just as they started to find harmony, an unexpected obstacle emerged from Lucas's world. Rumors began circulating in the business world about Lucas's relationship with Emily, and whispers grew louder about her supposed influence over his decisions. Accusations flew that Lucas's judgment was being clouded by his romantic involvement, hinting that his focus was shifting away from his own company and toward Harvest Gate Foods. One morning, as he scanned through his emails, Lucas found a message from his board of directors. They expressed concerns about his involvement with Emily and hinted at potential consequences if his relationship affected the company's performance. They were cautious words, but the message was clear. His commitment to Emily was starting to be seen as a liability. Frustrated and conflicted, Lucas showed Emily the email, his face taut with tension. She read through it, her expression unreadable. "I knew this would happen eventually," she said quietly. "They were bound to see me as a threat." Lucas frowned, shaking his head. "They don't understand us. I refuse to let anyone dictate who I'm with." You've changed my life in ways I can't even put into words. I don't care what they think. Emily smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. I know you don't, but they're right about one thing: you have responsibilities. People rely on you, and if being with me puts that at risk. No. Lucas's voice was firm, and he took her hands in his. I won't let them scare us. We can work through this. We'll just be careful. Make sure we keep business and personal matters separate. But Emily, leaving you isn't an option. Her fingers tightened around his, her eyes searching his face for reassurance. She knew he meant every word, but she also knew how merciless the corporate world could be. The path ahead wasn't going to be easy. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough. A growing rift. Despite Lucas's determination, the scrutiny continued to grow. Industry gossip spread, and even some of his closest colleagues began to question his decisions. Every choice he made was dissected, with people eager to find evidence that Emily's influence had affected him. One afternoon, Emily was approached by a journalist who'd caught wind of the rumors. They asked her direct, probing questions about her relationship with Lucas, implying that she was manipulating him for her own gain. Emily maintained her composure, answering politely and deflecting the invasive questions. But she felt a pang of anger and hurt. She had worked so hard to establish her independence, and now people were treating her as though she were a mere accessory in Lucas's life. When she confided in Lucas that evening, he was furious. How dare they question your integrity? You've built more from scratch than most of these people could even dream of. Emily sighed, her gaze distant. It's not about the truth, Lucas. It's about perception. And right now, the perception is that I'm some kind of puppet master controlling you from behind the scenes. It's exhausting. Lucas wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. Let's take a break. Then, let's go away for a while. Escape all this noise. Emily smiled against his shoulder. But she knew a vacation wouldn't solve their problems. They were both public figures, bound by the worlds they had built. And the scrutiny wasn't going to vanish just because they did. She loved Lucas deeply, but the pressure was beginning to wear on her, and she could sense that he felt the same. Breaking point. The tension finally reached a boiling point when Lucas's board of directors gave him an ultimatum. They insisted that he take a step back from his involvement with Harvest Gate Foods and focus solely on his own company or face consequences that could jeopardize his leadership role. Lucas stormed into Emily's office that evening, frustration radiating from him. They're trying to force me to choose between you and my company. I won't stand for it. Emily looked up from her desk, her expression unreadable. Lucas, maybe they're right. Maybe we've crossed too many lines between our personal and professional lives. If your company needs you, then maybe we should take a step back, for now. He stared at her, disbelief etched across his face. Are you saying you want to end things? No, she replied softly, her voice steady. But I'm saying that if we're going to protect what we've built, both of us, we may need some distance. At least until the situation calms down. Lucas felt as though the ground had shifted beneath him. He couldn't imagine his life without her. Yet he knew she was speaking from a place of wisdom and experience. Her calmness, her resolve, it was one of the things he loved about her. Even as it broke his heart in this moment. Then promise me this, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Promise me that when this all settles, we'll come back to each other. Emily nodded, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears. I promise. Lucas, this isn't goodbye, it's just a pause. They embraced, holding each other tightly, as though they could freeze time. And in that moment, they both knew that no matter the distance or the challenges ahead, their love would endure. New beginnings. The weeks that followed were difficult. They spoke occasionally, exchanging updates about their respective businesses. But it wasn't the same. The longing between them grew. And yet they each focused on strengthening their empires. Lucas threw himself into his work with renewed intensity. And his company's performance stabilized, silencing his critics. Meanwhile, Emily's new restaurant concept became a resounding success, receiving praise for its innovation and intimacy. Months passed, and gradually, the rumors and scrutiny faded. Lucas's board members, seeing his commitment to the company, began to relax their concerns. The scandal had passed, and though the absence of Emily had left a void in his life, he knew it had been the right choice. One evening, as Lucas sat in his office, the city lights casting a warm glow over the skyline, he received a message from Emily. Dinner at my place? I think we've waited long enough. His heart leapt, and he didn't waste a second. Within half an hour, he was at her door, feeling a rush of excitement and relief. Emily opened the door, looking radiant, her smile warm and inviting. "Come in," she said, her voice soft. They shared a quiet, intimate dinner, both aware of the significance of this moment. The time apart had changed them, deepened their understanding of what they truly meant to each other. As the night wore on, Lucas took her hand across the table. "Emily, I never stopped thinking about you. About us." She met his gaze, her eyes filled with emotion. "Neither did I, but I think the time apart made me realize that we don't need to merge our worlds to be happy. We can be together without losing ourselves." Lucas nodded, understanding. "I want that too. I love you, Emily, and I respect you, in every way." They leaned across the table, their foreheads touching, both feeling a sense of peace and certainty that had eluded them before. This time, there were no conditions, no doubts. They were together, not as business partners or as people defined by their success, but as two souls who had found solace in each other's strength and independence. Epilogue. In the months that followed, Emily and Lucas found a new rhythm. They built their lives side by side, each running their own empire but sharing their lives, their dreams, and their love without reservation. They learned to navigate their relationship with patience and trust, creating a bond that was unbreakable, forged through trials and separation. They attended events together, their love a quiet, steady force that no longer needed validation from the outside world. They had proven, to themselves and to each other, that their connection was built on respect and understanding, not on dependency or compromise. And as they walked through life hand in hand, they knew they had finally found what they had both been searching for, a love that was as boundless as the sky above. A love that was theirs alone. Epilogue. A love reclaimed. It had been nearly a year since Lucas and Emily had rekindled their relationship, and they had entered into a harmony that neither could have predicted. For the first time, they had found a balance between their love and their ambitions, weaving their lives together with a respect that acknowledged their individual paths as well as the shared dreams that bound them. A new kind of together. Lucas and Emily had chosen to live separately, in homes that spoke to their individual tastes. Lucas's penthouse was sleek and modern, filled with light and glass, overlooking the heartbeat of New York City, a reminder of his love for the energy and ambition that drove him. Meanwhile, Emily had purchased a quiet brownstone tucked in a historic neighborhood, adorned with touches of her own warmth and simplicity, a space that reflected her journey and the peace she valued so deeply. They spent their weekends in a rhythm that felt as comfortable as it was thrilling. On Friday nights, they would meet at Emily's brownstone, slipping into a routine that balanced quiet dinners and laughter-filled conversations that stretched into the early hours. Sundays were for Lucas's penthouse, for city views and brunch, for talking about books, politics, and the world beyond their own experiences. It was a life both exhilarating and grounded, a love without boundaries, and yet a love rooted in mutual respect. Lucas marveled at how this woman, this remarkable woman, had transformed his world. He had never known what it was like to live fully until she walked into his life. And now, having experienced a love that was fiercely independent yet beautifully shared, he found himself grateful every day. An unexpected offer. One crisp autumn day, Emily received an invitation to speak at a prestigious culinary conference in Paris. The invitation was more than just professional recognition. It was a testament to her influence in the world of food and her role as a pioneer in modern cuisine. As she read through the details, excitement sparked in her eyes. But beneath it, there was hesitation. That evening, she shared the news with Lucas over dinner at a cozy French bistro near her place. "Paris," Lucas said, smiling as he raised his glass. "Emily, that's incredible. You deserve it." Emily returned his smile but looked down thoughtfully. "It's more than just a speech. They're offering me a position on their board, a chance to shape culinary standards across Europe, to open doors for new talent." Lucas's eyes widened, fully grasping the gravity of the opportunity. "Emily, that's huge. You've always wanted to bring your vision to the world. This is it." She nodded slowly, but he could see the conflict in her expression. "But it's in Paris, Lucas. I'd have to split my time between New York and Europe. At least for a few years. Harvest Gate is still growing. And there's so much I need to do here." And, she hesitated, her gaze meeting his. "I'd be away from you." Lucas reached across the table, taking her hand. "Emily, I want you to go after this with everything you have. We've come this far because we believe in each other's dreams. And we'll figure out the rest." She searched his face, and in that moment, she knew how much he meant it. She nodded, squeezing his hand. "Then we'll do this together." The Paris chapter. 2 months later, Emily's life began to unfold across 2 cities. Paris brought its own rhythm, and Lucas visited often, his presence in the city a reminder of the world they were building despite the miles between them. Paris suited Emily well. Her evenings were filled with dinners with culinary icons, late-night strolls along the Seine, and moments where she marveled at how far she had come. Yet, whenever she returned to New York, she felt the rush of home, the familiar warmth of her neighborhood, and the comfort of Lucas's embrace. Lucas, meanwhile, found himself thriving in new ways. He took on ambitious projects, growing his company and setting trends in the tech industry. But he kept Emily's influence close to him. She had shown him the beauty in savoring life, in finding joy beyond success and prestige. And he brought that mindset into his work. He learned to prioritize not just achievement, but the relationships that made his life richer. They had adapted to their new chapter with grace, though it wasn't always easy. They faced long-distance challenges, missed calls, time zone differences, and the ache of absence. Yet they both knew they had chosen this path, and the resilience it required strengthened their love. Their love was no longer about needing each other to feel complete. It was about choosing each other every day, regardless of distance or time. A proposal of the heart. One summer, Lucas arranged a surprise trip for Emily. She had just finished a long month in Paris, and he could tell she was exhausted. When she arrived in New York, he whisked her away to a private retreat in the Catskill Mountains, a place where they could escape from the demands of their worlds and simply be together. One evening, as the sun set over the mountains, they sat outside by a crackling fire, wrapped in warm blankets and surrounded by nature's serenity. The air was filled with the scent of pine, and the soft rustling of leaves formed a peaceful backdrop to their conversation. "Emily," Lucas said, turning to her with a soft smile, "I've thought about what it would mean to ask you to marry me. And I know that it wouldn't be about traditional vows or big ceremonies. But I realized something." He paused, his gaze steady. "I don't need you to change. And I don't need you to be by my side every moment of every day. I just need to know that wherever we are, we're choosing each other, that this love is what we're building every day." Emily looked at him, her heart full. She understood exactly what he was saying, because she felt it too. That marriage, for them, was not about merging their lives completely but about continuing to walk side by side, honoring each other's paths. "Then let's make our own vows." "Lucas," she replied, her voice soft, "I promise to stand by you, to support your dreams as fiercely as my own, and to choose you every day, no matter where this journey takes us." They exchanged quiet, heartfelt promises under the starlit sky. No formal ceremony, no rings, and yet, for them, it was more sacred than any traditional vows could ever be. They belonged to each other, not as halves of a whole, but as two complete individuals choosing to share their lives. Years later, the years passed, and Lucas and Emily's lives continued to evolve. They became pillars of their industries, each pioneering new ideas, respected not only for their success but for the integrity with which they led. Lucas's company expanded into international markets, and he became known for his progressive views on business and technology. Emily's influence in the culinary world grew as well, and her board position in Europe became a platform for inspiring a new generation of chefs and entrepreneurs. And through it all, they remained each other's steadfast partners. They continued their pattern of living across 2 cities, sometimes even 3 when their paths took them to other parts of the world. They bought a home together in Provence, a quiet villa surrounded by lavender fields and olive groves, where they would meet whenever they needed an escape from their busy lives. It became their sanctuary, a place where they could reconnect and remind themselves of the simple, unbreakable love they had nurtured over the years. A love that lasts. One evening, as they sat on the villa's terrace, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Emily turned to Lucas, her eyes soft with contentment. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" Lucas took her hand, smiling. "All the time. Sometimes I wonder how I got so lucky." Emily laughed, the sound rich and full. Lucas Gray, you know you're a force of nature. You would have found your way here. With or without me. Maybe, he replied thoughtfully, but I wouldn't be the man I am without you. You showed me a world beyond ambition. A world where there's joy in the journey and in the quiet moments. Emily squeezed his hand, understanding, and you gave me the courage to dream even bigger. To believe that I could change the world. They sat together in comfortable silence. The lavender-scented breeze wrapping around them like a gentle embrace. They had built a love that transcended distance and time. A love that was resilient and unwavering. They knew they would continue to face challenges. But they also knew that they were stronger together, partners in every sense of the word. Legacy of love. Lucas and Emily's journey inspired those around them. A quiet legacy of what love and respect could achieve. They were known for their success. Yes, but more importantly, they were known for their unwavering support of each other. For the way they championed each other's dreams without compromising their own. To their friends, family, and colleagues, they became a symbol of partnership, a reminder that love doesn't mean surrendering oneself but rather sharing the fullness of who you are with another. And as the years went by, their love remained a testament to the strength of two people who had found each other not to complete, but to enhance. They had lived, loved, and journeyed together, and in that journey, they had found a fulfillment that went beyond anything they had ever imagined. They had written their own story, one of independence, ambition, and deep, unwavering love, and it was a story that would be theirs forever. With their love shining as brightly as ever, Lucas and Emily continued walking through life side by side, hand in hand, forever choosing each other every single day.